Ladies and gentlemen, the appointed hour has arrived for our Public Safety Committee meeting. If everyone please give attention now, I want to recognize Representative Mac Jackson to lead us in a word of prayer, please.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we come before you, we thank you for this day, first of all. We ask for your blessing. We ask for your wisdom as we go through these series of hearings, Lord. Lead and guide us. Show us the path that you would have us to walk, and we'll be sure and give you the praise, the honor, and the glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. We have several committee members that are joining us online also today. Can everybody hear us online? Everybody there?
Yes, sir. I sure can.
Okay, we got Rick Jaspers online. Who else is there with us online?
Yasmin Neal.
Okay. We got Jesse Petrie. Jesse, are you with us?
Micah Gravely.
Okay.
Clint Crow.
Representative Crow. Anyone else online with us today?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? This is Micah Gravely.
I got you. Thank you.
Rick Williams.
Anyone else out there?
Rick Williams.
Thank you, Rick.
Yes, sir.
Danny Mathis, Vice Chairman Danny Mathis, are you online with us today? I'm sure he'll be back with us in a few moments. Well, again, I want to thank members of the committee for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here with us. Shortly before the session concluded, Speaker Ralston asked that this committee come together over the summer to talk about the crime that we've had in the metro Atlanta and the Atlanta area. It's just been a huge increase. It's been a concern for our speaker. It's been a concern for our constituents and been a concern for those who live in the Atlanta area. I want to say that this committee wants to dig down and look at the facts. There's going to be a lot of politics involved in this, and we want to try to sidestep that. And we want to have productive hearings that can get down to exactly what's going on. Because as you all know, the success of the city of Atlanta is directly impacted by the success of Georgia and vice versa. And I want to thank you for coming together today. And this is really just going to be a brief organizational type meeting. I want to be respectful of the committee members' time, especially as we move into the summer. I know that many of you have plans that you have. We've got to come back over here in the fall to talk about reapportionment, redistricting. So I want to make sure and try to be respectful of your time and to hear from different members as to who you think that you want to hear testimony from. And we can call those people together and hear from them later on in the summer. But at this time, I just want to kick off the meeting and just get some input from each and every one of you. If you have something you want to add and you have a group of people or an organization or a person that you think can come before this committee this summer and give us some testimony and present some statistics or just some information, we certainly don't want to waste time. But if you have something that you'd like to add to the meeting today, I want to give each and every member the opportunity to speak and bring their thoughts and ideas to the body. So let's start off here with Chairman Green.
Did you get
Can
it?
you give us some testimony and present some statistics or just some information?
There's Coach in here. Hey, Coach, I'll be through just a minute.
I think that's Chairman Mathis there. I recognize that South Georgia accent. All right. There you go. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Chairman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the speaker for reaching out to do this with this committee. As several people have already told me, said we have plenty of laws on the book. We need to look at some underlying causes, and that's not only true of Atlanta and the area here of our state capital, but Columbus and Albany and the rural areas too. And I want to try to bring some of those individuals up to testify to their growing problems and the needs that they see.
Okay. Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting to me that for this meeting to be called in the purpose. And you said it right on that, Atlanta's the capital city of this state. We're our focal point. And what's good about Atlanta and the metro area, which has always been considered the engine of the economic train in Georgia, it's very important. But we've seen over a period of years the change and transition. It's either the politics in Atlanta or the politics in the surrounding counties, the expansion of the metro area. But we've also seen some other problems that are of concern, and that's respect for the law enforcement agencies and law and order. And when I talk about that respect, that's a direct level of respect for the laws that are on the books. Now, we know that we have a lot of laws that are questionable at times. That's the reason we come up here the second Monday of every January to try to change certain things. We've recent years, we've done medical marijuana. We've done a lot of different things that were those little small issues that was rationale for law enforcement. And I understand that. But there's a bigger problem at the mix here. It's the socioeconomic problems that the Metro Atlanta, they encompass. Specifically, I have problems as I look at the news every morning from up on Lake Hartwell. Maybe I shouldn't say where I live at, because I certainly don't want some of these folks coming up to Hart County very much, especially the ones that are have a propensity to violate the law. But I look at the news every day and I'm just aghast at what I see. 30-something years working on public safety issues in the legislature, motor vehicle issues, and all of this. I go back to an issue we've talked about for years, and it's hard for me to believe that that young people violate the rules of the road, whether it be the drag racing or whatever it is that they do. But that's just a small part to it. That's nothing like the more serious crime, the assaults, the break-ins, the active shooter issues, the black on black crime, which is of a major concern to me, because I've always been of the opinion, if you can't respect your own neighborhoods and your own people, how can you be expected to respect the others? Now, there's other things that we've looked at. I noticed that the Buckhead Coalition was passing out their brochures, and I certainly don't think this is about Buckhead cityhood, this meeting. This is about getting into the gist of an issue of what needs to be done. That's another issue that'll come up and go to a different committee than public safety, and hopefully different than regulated industries at that time. But we need to start digging into it. Your question is, who do I think needs to be invited to speak? Well, I thought about that while I was down in my office before I came up here. I'd like to call off a list of the first priorities that I saw. And these certainly don't have any ranking, but I think they do. We have a new district attorney in Atlanta. I think that so far the marks that I've given this one seem to be quite superior to the last district attorney. But I think that we need to hear from the district attorney. We need to hear from the ADAs. Water runs downhill. We don't just need to hear from the talking heads at the top. We need to hear from the others, and whether they'll give us their the latitude to give us their viewpoints. I think we need to make that available to them. Law enforcement. It's not just about listening to the chiefs of the police and the folks who have the brass on their shoulders. We need to be talking to the rank and file police officers. We need to be talking to these men and women who are out there on the daily basis, not sitting in the office. And I'm not talking about just active police. I would be more interested to talk to some of the retired police officers who have bailed out as quickly as they could from Atlanta PD. I'd be interested in talking to some of the police officers who were basically drummed out without due process to find out what was the issues here. What has what has dissolved the desire or the effects of being a law enforcement officer in the metro area? We need to hear from some of the judges to find out from them the burden that they've got. Bonding services, these are all folks that we need to hear from. And that being said, knowing the politics, and when we're doing public hearings, it's one thing for them to come to that podium and to speak. But a lot of these folks need to have our individual cell phone numbers. If you're afraid to come up here, if you're a former officer or a former ADA or whoever you are, you need to give some of us a call. And I can trust you. You can trust me when I tell you that your name won't be divulged. But you need to testify. You need to be heard. Then we get to the last group. We need to hear from the people in the community. I talked about the Buckhead Coalition. I remember when I was a kid when they built Lenox Plaza, and I used to come up and spend the summers up here with my aunt and uncle, and that was their punishment for not having children when my parents used to send me up here. But I remember when Lenox was built, and it was always a great place to go shop and all of that. Quite frankly, I don't know a lot of us that'll go to Lenox anymore. Towers Liquor Store, good folks that run that facility over there. They've changed their operation because of carjackings, because of assaults. They've quit handling certain products in their retail store to try to disincentivize some people from coming in there. So, these are issues, but we need to hear from the merchants. We need to hear from the citizens, not just in the business community, but we need to hear from a lot of the citizen activists in some of the communities where black on black violence is so prevalent that it's a concern to me when I turn on the news and I hear about people going through a neighborhood and shooting through windows or shooting children. This is totally unacceptable. And we need to reach in to find out what it will take, despite the political agendas of so many groups today that have negative connotations toward law enforcement. But we need to figure out what it's going to take to put this ship back right in the water. Because if you don't have strong public safety, then you have chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this meeting and for this Public Safety Committee to be involved in it. Certainly think that there are a lot of issues that are going on. I live in rural Georgia. I don't live in Atlanta, and I can't really articulate the issues here in Atlanta except for what I read and see on the news. But I do think the crime is a problem. And as Chairman Powell said, there are a lot of groups that we need to hear from, I think. I think we need to hear from citizens, the citizens that live here in Atlanta, activist groups, also churches. We need to hear from the church group, the faith community about crime here in Atlanta. And there's just so many moving parts to this issue. I don't think that there's just one size that fits all when you come to crime, because we not only have it in Atlanta, we're experiencing a rise in crime too in rural communities also. I've talked to some of the law enforcement in our areas, and they talk about gang activity that's happening right now in rural Georgia. And we're trying to put together some community hearings on the same level as this to hear from our citizens and hear from different activist groups concerning this gang activity. But to get a handle on it is good, and I think we're moving in the right direction. So I'll be here for the meetings. I'm interested to hear from the different speakers that will be involved in this so that we can all learn together as to how we can get things back to where society used to be, or we can get a handle on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Workheiser.
Thank you, Chairman. It's hard to add to the group that's already been listed. Many people were surprised. I was actually born and raised less than a mile and a half from here and walked many of these streets. It's hard to believe now riding around those neighborhoods that the distances we walked, we certainly wouldn't do that today. In addition to a lot of the groups that have been mentioned, leadership matters. And I think we ought to invite the mayor here. I think she has given some broad stroke measures. It'd be interesting to hear some specifics now that she's obviously had some time to think about it, and for us to be able to question what implementations are now being taken place. So that would be my only addition to all the fine groups that have been mentioned. Thank you.
Representative Evans.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Yes. So I believe I'm the only committee member that has City of Atlanta in the district. Is that, but I'm not sure about Yasmin. Is that true? Yasmin? Yeah. So I'm a part of the Atlanta delegation, and I live in DeKalb County though. So most of Atlanta is in Fulton, but we have portions in DeKalb. So I agree with many of the sentiments of my colleagues here about groups to invite. And so in addition to all those that have been named, I would ask that we include the chair of the Atlanta delegation, Representative Holland, and also the chair of the Fulton delegation, David Dreyer, because they're familiar with these issues coming up within their own communities. And in addition to all these other groups, the Atlanta DA, I wondered if you wanted to include the DeKalb DA. The Atlanta DA actually handles the City of Atlanta crime, but in Metro Atlanta, DeKalb is, right there. And so, that's another possibility if you wanted to broaden to that. And I agree about inviting the mayor and the chiefs of police and community members and churches and those affected by crime, those that have been experiencing the crime. I also wanted to ask us to invite people who've studied the issue. So people maybe at our academic institutions from University of Georgia or Georgia State or Kennesaw that, have a background in this area. So, subject matter experts in this area. And one other point I would just like to make is that it is true that I've talked with Representative Holland, and it's absolutely true. We've had this rise in crime in Atlanta, it's up 60% for murder, aggravated assault, and auto theft. And then for robbery and larceny, it's actually down a little bit. But this rise in murder, aggravated assault, and auto theft, this is something, it's happening in like 63 of the 66 metro areas. So it is, across our nation. So that's where perhaps experts that study this can help us understand those issues too. I think that's it. And then also, I agree with Representative Green. If we want to look at root causes, I'm interested in hearing from the Southern Center for Human Rights as well, because they've done a lot of work in this arena. And and then we may want to look at criminal defense and prosecuting attorneys as well.
Thank you very much. Representative Holcomb.
Chairman, I'd be interested in knowing more about what the deliverables are that you're anticipating. And what I mean by that is for the short term, are we looking at the allocation of state resources and making recommendations in that regard? For the long term, are we exploring potential policy initiatives that might be considered in the 2022 General Assembly? So in terms of where we're going, I think that would be helpful, at least for me and maybe some other members. But for the things to listen to that I would be curious to hear about, in addition to what's been stated, would be to have a statistical analysis of what has happened. I did a little bit of digging last night, and the city of Atlanta, to their credit, post a lot of the crime statistics online to include CSV files, which you can download. And then I didn't have time to take the categorical variables and turn them into numbers and then run various statistical analyses, but that can be done. And we can look and see, are there any correlations that can be identified between different variables and outcomes? Of course, correlation is not causation, but to have both against a backdrop of maybe several years. So is what we're looking at an aberration, or is it a buildup? And can we then use some statistical analysis to inform where crimes are happening for the allocation of resources and potential interventions? I think that would be helpful because the data is there, but we need to have it interpreted for us in a way that's meaningful that we could then potentially act upon it. The other thing that I'd be curious to know, and I think it's challenging, just like many of the public policy issues that we deal with, because crime is a multivariable issue. We're coming off of, or hopefully at the tail end of a pandemic. So my sense is that has impacted crime, but do I know exactly how? No. My sense is economic insecurity has impacted crime. I think all of us have received a massive flow of emails from constituents who either waited an extremely long time or never received unemployment benefits. So is there a connection there? And maybe there's something we can do to leverage state resources to help alleviate some economic anxiety. And just overall, to do this in a very thoughtful way of both trying to address the short-term issue, because everybody should live in a place of safety. So I am certainly supportive of trying to help reduce the incidence of crime, both in Atlanta and across our state. But then are there some lessons that we can take from this to then inform future policymaking? And the last thing that I'll say on it is, from time to time, I take a look at the state's correctional data for prison. And if you look at that, you'll see that like 91, 92% of those who are in our state's jails have a high school degree, a GED or less. And so you have to recognize, or the state has to recognize, that education is a tie here. It is not going to fix what is happening in the next weeks or months or anything. It is not a short-term issue. But if we are trying to take long-term paths towards this, I think all of those things I'd be considered. And I'll close with, it loops back to my initial question of what are the things that you're looking for from this committee? Are you looking for short-term and long-term solutions, or are you mostly focused on the short-term? Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. You brought up some very great points there. And I would say to the committee that I would say we need to be looking at both. I think that we can see that the ship is in the middle of a storm. We're losing a war on crime. And I think you have to look both short-term and long-term with what we're going to dig into. We have some members that are online that would wish to speak. Representative Neal. Representative Neal, you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am. We have you.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for everyone being. So yes, I do want to piggyback on what Representative Scott Holcomb mentioned in reference to bringing out individuals from the analytical arm of this issue in the criminal statistics space. And definitely, I think like Representative Becky Evans mentioned, the collegiate researchers as well will be very important. And just organizations on the analytical side, and I can actually get you some specific names of those entities as soon as possible, Mr. Chairman. But yes, like Representative Scott Holcomb mentioned as well, sometimes these issues arise because, you know, the situations has changed, the world has changed. So quite naturally, property crime goes down during the time of COVID because everyone's at home. So people don't tend to break into homes that are occupied. But at the same time, peer-to-peer crime does go up because, you know, people are at home and they're enclosed in in one space together for, extended amounts of time. And so that creates tension. And that same thing also occurs during some of our holidays. In my experience, for Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, the times of the year where people are together in a more long-term fashion, crime tends to go up in that when it comes to peer-to-peer crime. So I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. I'm looking forward to getting you these names so we can actually see what we're dealing with from an analytical perspective and pinpoint exactly what happened or determine if this is an anomaly. And in the meantime, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield.
Thank you. Who else is online there? Representative Gravely, if you want to speak at this time, we'll recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate all the committee members being there today and those of you that are online as well as in person. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to I know that one of the Atlanta Police Union representatives, longtime detective with the department, lives out in our area, in that Douglas Villarica area, and has had some very interesting data come through about how many officers the Atlanta Police Department has lost in the last year, how many officers they are down, shift patrols that are not being manned, neighborhoods that no longer have patrols because the officers have left the city of Atlanta. This data is real and factual data. So how many positions are open with the city of Atlanta Police Department, why the officers have left, why they've gone to other surrounding communities, municipalities, and county sheriff's offices. I'd also like to invite the Douglas County Sheriff, Tim Pounds, on how this, because we neighbor, you and I both represent Douglas County, it neighbors Fulton County and city of Atlanta, and how this has affected our community. Also, Chief Gary Sparks with the Douglasville Police Department to get an idea of how maybe resources are being utilized and how that is affecting our community on that Fulton industrial area or side of Atlanta. I too agree with a lot of what all of the committee members have said, I'd like to see the data taking into account the last year of COVID, taking into account the economic aspect of things. I too have constituents. I think our last count was about 26 cases that we're working on of folks who were once working and have yet to hear anything from the Department of Labor, some in 15, 16, 20 weeks. I've not even got a return phone call or email confirmation that their applications were even accepted. We continue to deal with that, as I know my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are dealing with that and working diligently trying to serve these constituents and their needs. I would also be interested in hearing from the different groups that represent both associations in the state, from different communities and neighborhood communities that have formed to address the crimes, to address the break-ins. I was at the Capitol yesterday for a meeting, and one of the members of our judiciary has an apartment or a condo just down the street, a couple of blocks from the Capitol. And they said for every night from 11 a.m. to or 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., the street racing that's going on keeps them up. They're probably going to have to sell or end the lease because they literally, whether it be motorcycles, four-wheelers, or cars, the street racing that's going on in that community or in those side streets is just unbelievable. So those are the comments. I appreciate everybody else's comments. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you chairing the committee, and I look forward to us finding solutions that are going to work for the members of these communities in the surrounding metro area.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman Gravely. Who else do we have online that wishes to speak today? Representative Crowe, are you there with us? Would you like to go ahead and be recognized?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo much of what all of my colleagues have said and who we need to talk to. I think it's a pretty exhaustive list of folks that we need to talk to. I do appreciate Representative Gravely mentioning the police union. I'd also like to reach out and try to talk to the Fraternal Order of Police and the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. I think that I have friends, I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I spent many years working as a patrolman and an investigator with the Metro Atlanta Police Department. And so I still have a lot of friends that work with the Atlanta Police Department and surrounding areas. And they are short. They are many, many open positions that can't be filled, and that has to be addressed. But I think more so than that, we have to address the morale of those that still work there. You know, with the crime that's going on, we don't have, in order to stop some of that crime that's going on in certain areas, you have to have more proactive policing. All the statistical analysis is great to tell you where the crime is, but in order to stop that, you need to have proactive policing to go out and do that. And right now, I think that a lot of the officers are hesitant to go out and proactively police because they fear a lack of support from their superiors and the city. And I think we need to try to look at ways that we can help stem that and make sure that we root out the officers who are not doing a good job, but that we wholeheartedly support the officers that are doing a good job and make sure they know that they have our support for going out and enforcing the laws that we pass. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have Chancellor Rick Jasper, Chairman Rick Jaspers, who is here with us online. Chairman Jaspers, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you taking on a very difficult subject. You know, it'll be difficult more as we move on. Just listen to the questions and the people we want to speak. But I just want to tell you, in rural Georgia, you know, crime has no bounds. You know, just recently we had somebody from Atlanta, you know, kill somebody and bring them to LJ to get rid of them, you know, up in my neck of the woods. And I hate that. That's the sort of thing that's happened. And we're covered up with people moving to North Georgia right now, fleeing. If you talk to them in the barbershop or in the grocery store, you know, they're fleeing crime because they're scared, and they're scared for their families. And it's something we need to get a handle on. You know, a couple of things I thought of thinking about this meeting today is, like others have said, statistics. You know, I'm just curious what, you know, APS and others, there's crime statistics. I've seen some maps that Scott talked about, but I'd also like to see 911 calls that are placed for law enforcement help. You know, that way I think we could compare and see, you know, some things that are charged versus what people are scared of, and looking at what's out there. I'd just like to see some of that data. You know, and I, like Chairman Powell, I would really like to hear from law enforcement themselves, you know, not as he said, the administration, but street folks, those people who have been let go, and those who have left. I think they're going to give us the best insight of really what's going on, and maybe even some good solutions. And, you know, the people I feel sorry for, I think you mentioned it, Mr. Chairman, you know, Lenox Small having to put in metal detectors to go in there. You know, I went there as a child, and all through taking my kids there for Christmas. It's absolutely crying shame that's going on. And the burden that crime is created for these businesses. I know that's a lot. You got a lot. Boy, you got Miss Abby. You've given her a lot of things to work on and speakers to get. Don't keep her too busy. I got work for her to do too. But I appreciate you and the seriousness of this committee to look at. It's a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope things are good up there in Jasper.
Got my tomatoes planted. They are.
Good deal. All right. Representative Frazier, are you with us? Would you like to give some testimony and speak here today?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We got you. We can see you too. Yes,
thank you. And thank you for having this meeting. I think pretty much as it relates to speakers, mostly I agree with all the recommendations that have been currently made, but I just wanted to also talk about something we don't talk about a whole lot, and I look at it as a big elephant in the room, but we need to also address the gun issue. And so I would just like to add to that list an organization called Every Town for Gun Safety, because we also have to be straight and frank with each other that a lot of the crimes that are being committed is because of the gun laws that we have on the book. And so I have friends that are in law enforcement also, and I have a couple of friends that have left that career because they feel that they are outgunned by the citizens. And so that is something that we need to address also. And we need to, as far as the academia part, bring in the psychiatrists to talk about why we're at this point, not just for COVID, because it's not just an Atlanta problem. I'm here in Burke County, and I have a town right here in Waynesboro, Georgia, and we have an increase in crime. But a lot of times it's domestic, and a lot of it was done during COVID when everybody had to stay at home. So I appreciate this conversation, but this is just not about Atlanta, because if we do a comparative analysis and bring some of the other cities with the same population across the country, and that would also be a good idea to bring some outside experts in that are also having the same problems in other major cities, and maybe a couple of them, and address the issues and see how they are also dealing with these issues and what they have in place. And I'm hoping the outcome of this will be something that we can bring back in 2022 to address these issues and possibly put more funding in place and mechanisms in place that will help us deter the crime and reduce the crime here in Georgia.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. Chairman Jesse Petrie, you're recognized at this time.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Got you.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate your leadership, Chairman, on this very important issue. As I think most of my colleagues here recognize, we have a serious problem with crime here in Savannah as well. And indeed, 7 years ago when I ran for office, I ran largely on that issue. And most of y'all are aware that much of my efforts in the legislature have been focused on crime, particularly on the parole process. And so I would like to add parole, pardons and parole, and the whole idea and the notion that we parole violent felons to this mix. Department of Justice statistics data shows that about 72% of violent felons will reoffend with a violent crime within 5 years upon release. And I would remind everybody that we release over 3,000 felons a year early on parole in this state. And so at any rate, I would think that's an issue. I want to, Representative Holcomb mentioned a very important factor as it relates to root causes. I would just piggyback on that. He mentioned education. I would like to make it clear and like us to consider the impact of fatherlessness. Having studied crime very deeply over my 7 years in the legislature, there's a direct correlation in zip codes with high crime, with high fatherlessness rates. And so if we're going to talk about root causes, let's talk about all of the root causes of crime. And there are many. That, of course, is one very important one. And of course, has also been alluded here. We've discussed the issue with morale in law enforcement. And again, most of my colleagues here know that we added about a 20% increase to our Georgia State Patrol salaries recently, because for the first time in history, we could not fill the ranks of our classes to recruit Georgia State Patrolmen. We clearly have morale issues. So there's so many issues, some of which have been touched on. And I just wanted to mention, and by the way, I mentioned 3,000, I meant 30,000 individuals paroled annually in the state early. And so, but those issues are some that I might add to those that have already been discussed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Hope everything's well on the coast down there where you are.
Yes, sir.
Next person we have, Vice Chairman Mathis, are you back with us? Okay.
Are you there?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you for having this meeting and all the participants. It's a very, very serious issue. I thank the speaker for putting this at the forefront, because safety in all of Georgia is imperative for the success of our state. And the rhetoric has to change in a positive way on both sides. And I appreciate each individual's comments that I've heard, and I want to thank all of you. And I'm looking forward to meeting with you, and hopefully we can come to some solutions to these problems. And I do thank you, Chairman Call.
Thank you. Representative Williams, do you have anything you want to add to this? Is he still with us? Okay. Chairwoman Taylor, do you want to say anything here with us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. We hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate your having this study committee, because it is a major issue. I've been around long enough to know that spikes in crime come, but they don't go away unless you do something about them. And I think a lot of the things that we've heard today are vital. We need to hear from the mayor. We need to hear from law enforcement officials, preferably those that have been successful in cutting their crime rates. I think there's a lot that can be done. I think we need to hear from the victims. We talked about looking at the 911 reports. I want to see the response time. How are people being served by their local law enforcement? I think this is very important. And as we look to why there are spikes in crime, poverty's always been with us. There's always been excuses, but we cannot let that continue. And again, another issue that I think right now is vital is mental illness. That has got to be part of what we look at when we do these. I am very grateful that we're doing this study. We have got to find an answer to this. Atlanta has been the engine that runs Georgia. We cannot let this deteriorate the state of Georgia. It's a reflection on all of us, and I think we all want it to be fixed. The method of going about it is beginning today with finding out what's wrong, and then how can we fix it? And we do need to hear from the experts. So I appreciate your having this. Thank you.
Anyone else before we close out here today?
I'm here now. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for this meeting. Pardon me, I echo the sentiments of everyone else that has spoken. And I think Representative Taylor had hit on the nail on the head, that a lot of it is mental illness. And this is something that we're facing all over Georgia with the drug addiction and other issues. But my sheriff in Baldwin County has more mental patients in his facility than he does actually criminals. And we've got to research and find out to get these people help and to get these people off the street and to stop them from taking advantage and harming innocent people. And I just echo everyone else's sentiments, and I thank you for the meeting. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. A couple of other comments I wanted to make. Sheriff Labatt's office has reached out to me, and he obviously wants to be a part of the discussion here today, and he's here with us, and we want to thank him for being here with us. I've talked to Terry Norris from the Sheriff's Association. He's reached out to me, and also I have to say that the city of Atlanta has reached out to us a couple of different times, and they've come to the table and they want to be a part of this process and want to provide as much information as they can and as that we request from them. And I obviously want to hear from Colonel Wright with the Department of Public Safety, and thank Governor Kemp for his efforts in utilizing the Department of Public Safety and the State Patrol to step in. I know they've been doing some things on the weekends, and I think that that's been working. So thank them for that, and we're going to hear from Colonel Wright. So as far as moving forward with this, when we depart here today, I want you to send in some dates that you are not available during the summer. Again, I know we're going to be back over here in the fall, so I don't really want to spend my whole summer tied up on this issue, but we need to spend a few days to look at this. So if you'll get with my assistant, Ellie, get some dates. I want to try to be respectful from all the committee's time, and maybe some of you can't make it, but we want to make sure that we can have as many members possible to be here to give some testimony and to hear from those who are going to give testimony. I have my own personal opinion about this, and I want to share that with you. I've heard from members of my committee. I think we're putting the handcuffs on the wrong people. I think we've handcuffed law enforcement for far too long. And I think that you're going to see some of the things that we're going to hear from our officers who have departed APD and some of the other jurisdictions that they feel like they can't do their job because leadership doesn't have their back. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I've heard as the chairman of this committee for several weeks now. And I also hope that, as Chairman Powell pointed out, if there's an officer out there that wants to speak to someone on this committee, I would encourage any peace officer who has dealt in the city of Atlanta to please reach out to this committee and feel like you can speak. So I appreciate those who are here with us today. I have one more comment. Representative Holcomb, you have something you'd like to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's actually a question of, in terms of planning, what is your sense in terms of the length for the hearings? Are you expecting a few days?
I would like
a couple
to see
over
us,
time?
I would like to see us do 2 days, maybe back to back, a day or a day and a half. I mean, we can sit here and hear so much testimony, but we're going to get together with the Vice Chairman Mathis, and I'm going to sit down with him, and we're going to kick around some ideas and have something for you. Hopefully, have a series of committee meetings later on in June. So have a couple of days in June, maybe have a couple of days in later July, because I know the holiday, 4th of July coming up, Independence Day. We don't want to be here during that time. So that's what I'm looking at. If you have another suggestion, I'm open to hearing that.
No, that sounds fine to me. And ordinarily we operate with a subcommittee process. Do you envision that as well, or are we mostly going to be full committee?
I don't anticipate this being a subcommittee process.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else at this time? We know, I know we have several people that want to speak, and we're going to give you an opportunity to speak, but this is just an organizational type meeting. And I know that I've spoken with many of you offline. And if you want to hang around and speak with any committee members, please feel free to do so. Chairman Eddie Lumsden is with us online. Chairman Lumsden, do you have anything you'd like to add before we adjourn this meeting? Are you there, Eddie?
No, sir, not at this
Yeah, I think
appreciate it.
there's that need for rural broadband. So shot. All right. Okay. Again, if anyone wants to speak with me, I'll be hanging around here for a little while. Thank you to those members of the press that have been here to cover for us today, and also for those groups who would like to be heard. Thank you very much. And this meeting is